Hello and welcome back to an episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me, Jürgen Dauk. He's an advisor and consultant. And by chance, we also used to work in the same kind of work years ago. Jürgen, also you are an author about leadership, operating system, and we're gonna talk about the book also as well. What I like to do with all my guests is, I leave to them to introduce themselves, tell us more about their background, their journeys, just a hint to our audience today. We are gonna discuss, as you have guessed, about leadership, how the AI is changing that space also as well. We're gonna talk about like how companies should be, investing in the transformation because we're living in unprecedented time. I don't like to steal time from my guests. So Jürgen, again, thank you for being with me on the show today. The floor is yours.
Mehmet, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to the show. Yeah, my name is Jürgen Dauk. I'm an advisor and consultant to companies and author of the book, The Leadership Operating System. So, yeah, how do I end up here, right? So I started my professional life as a techie. So I studied microelectronics over here in Germany. And as a part-time gig, I worked at a small tech firm that was producing hardware and software, right? And then over time, I stayed with the company for 12 years. I saw different sides of the business, not only tech, but also marketing, sales, customer support, customer success. And, I got interested really in the business side of technology. Um, Stayed at companies, huge companies like Oracle and OpenText, or mid-sized companies in the size of 1.5 to 5,000 people. Did a lot of transformation work and worked in mid to higher management positions in those companies. So, and most recently, I decided, I want to step out of the corporate world and, help companies to build better companies. Because what I saw was I kept on seeing repeating patterns in companies, things that do not work, right? And I started taking notes of those things. I saw pockets where things work better. And I started to get notes, to take notes, and also to do some research about it. What is the basis of things working in corporate, and why are other things failing, right? And this is how I came about writing a book. But what I'm really passionate about is building better companies where people can thrive, right? And profit and revenue is an outcome. I am a strong believer that revenue and profit is not a goal, but it's an outcome, a natural outcome of great people working towards one joint vision. And I think this is becoming even more relevant with the advent of AI, right? So if and we're going to talk about that, but with AI, if you have a old-fashioned top-down metrics organization, you are far too slow to benefit from implementing AI. So the companies that I'm seeing that are really benefiting from AI, they are much more agile. They have removed top-down decision making and moved more to shared ownership models, seeing a company more like an organism rather than a machine. And this is where you get the full benefit out of AI.
Right. Jürgen, again, thank you for this introduction and, being here with me today. I kind of start, and this is something I like to do since, my old days when I was also a technology consultant and shifted to sales as well. I like first to dig into the problem more, right? And you've worked with, just mentioned, bunch of organizations, and you just touched on that you saw things that keep repeating, like kind of a pattern, I would say. What are like some of these, I like to call them pains, right? Maybe they're not aware that they are pains, but what are like these pains that make them move slower and drift? I would call it, maybe it's the right word to say it, drift from the purpose of the company. Because to your point, I 100% agree with you that if you have great people, if you have the right structure, the outcome automatically becomes, as you mentioned, like revenues and all this. But what are like these common pitfalls that you have seen repeatedly happen in this organization? Like, if you can share that with us.
Yeah, I think one is really organizational design. If you have a typical setup, right, where you have a worldwide sales organization, then a worldwide marketing organization, and a worldwide customer success organization, and then implementation or whatever you have for your products or services. What you can see is you often have conflicting KPIs and people working against each other. The classical one is, you're at the end of a quarter, and the quarter end is typically super important to close it strongly and to achieve your set goals. And as those numbers come under pressure, people start blaming each other. Marketing is blaming sales for not being able to sell enough. Sales is blaming marketing for not bringing in enough leads, not doing strong enough branding. And customer success, who in the original sense of customer success was supposed to make the customer happy or make sure the customer is happy, is developed into a second sales organization only targeted towards upselling and cross-selling. So what you're getting is everybody blaming each other, and when the going gets tough at the end of a quarter, this maximizes.
Jürgen, you know what you mentioned, I think many people who would be listening to us now or watching, it will resonate with them because they said, yeah, this is exactly what happens. Now, the contrarian view, if I might call it this way, is why that happened. Because let me, because even myself, sometimes I wonder about it. Like, we kind of have proved that experiments show us sometimes that you okay, don't do this because it doesn't work, or like do that because it's the most successful way of doing things. Now, what I have noticed myself is throughout corporate history, let me put it this way, there are a lot of things, stories that even we keep sharing them. Sometimes we see them in form of videos with some narratives on top of them. And the I might say the market of this education is not scarce. Like, we have plenty of literature, books, all this, but still, why it does happen? Like, is it something related to the leadership style of people, which is the human aspect, or is it because it's a design, I would say, fault, that whatever you do, it's gonna happen after maybe the company reaches a certain amount of people, or maybe because this is the destiny of all, let's say, these companies in the SaaS business or maybe in the tech business. What's the secret of this keep repeating happening? And is there a way to avoid that?
There is, and definitely good question and good conversation. From my point of view, the reason why those structures exist is it was a management principle invented in the beginning of the last century, right? And it was good for that time. It was built for maximum stability and control. And it worked well for stable markets where control is the most important thing. Now, in the 21st century, that model isn't working anymore because the ultimate goal is to be maximum flexible in the market, to be adaptable, to be quick in decision making. And that is killing, is those structures are killing speed. So why is it that we're still seeing those companies? It's not a matter of size. So I've seen even young and fairly small companies trying to implement the staying model. The reason for that is still being taught in universities and business schools, right? That is number one. number two, so I see and I talk to a lot of companies, even really big companies that are trying to move away from that. But what that needs is really courageous and bold leadership. Because what that means is the owners of the companies, be it shareholders, private equity companies, right? If you are the CEO or a senior leader in a company, you have to sell this vision to the owners, to the shareholders, whoever is invested in your company, because what you need to let go of is part of the control. So if you're from a personality trait more like a managing fear based, right? If you're a fearful person and you try to then you try to cover yourself by keeping control. What it
Yeah.
requires to move away from the command and control element more to distributed decision making is bold leadership. Let go of the fear and trust the people that you've hired that they can make good decisions. But what it also requires is definitely a strong vision for the company. So without a vision, there's no passion. And without a vision, you don't have any basis to make distributed decisions. If you take the example of Amazon, right? They are very clear on their vision to become the most customer centric company, right? To delight their customers. So whenever a local decision needs to be made, right, they have a guiding principle. They can look at, will this benefit, you know, our customer experience? Will they benefit from it? So it's much easier to make a decision that way. If your only vision is we want to increase revenue by 20% year on year, right? I think that's a weak basis for making distributed decisions. But I think, to your point, I think a part is funded in how people are educated, and this is why I'm so passionate about speaking about new ways of working and building companies.
Hmm.
And the second part is really fear-based leadership, which is not enabling this kind of change.
Right. And to your point, I think this is part of it's not only universities to be fair, like so we don't put all the blame on education, which but by the way, I have like big I talked a lot of times about this and I have big question mark on this. But because you touch on sometimes how this comes maybe from a company that private equity, VC firm, whatever, that they have invested in a company and they tell them, hey, you know what? Like company X, which we invested in, they took this playbook and it worked with them like a charm. So go and implement the same playbook. And actually, we've seen this happening again and again. What ends up with people is they try to implement it, in my opinion, as a shortcut to success. But at the same time, people, Jürgen, maybe you have seen it also as a leader yourself, like people they don't want to say no, but at the same time they know that doesn't work, like like this will not lead us to anyway. I'm not against trying, but I think we are obsessed with following quote unquote playbooks and without customization. I'm not against the playbook, just to make it sure for the
Mhm.
audience, but I'm with optimizing and customizing the playbook for you. And I think this is something, and let's talk about it. So if we try to take such organization with a lot of the issues that you just discussed, and now they want to do this transformation with AI, like how what do you think the leaders are misunderstanding about that? How are you seeing like more organizations thinking, oh, I have these, they come to you say, hey Jürgen, you know what, like I have these problems here and I'm gonna implement AI. Are you like hearing these discussions thinking that AI is just the magic wand that you're gonna put and it's gonna solve all the problems?
Oh, 100%. I recently spoke to a big company. They are a supplier for the automotive industry, and they are half Austrian, half Canadian. And you know, they had huge pressure to implement AI company wide, with the expectation to have huge efficiency gains, right? So they've spent a lot of money and effort in selecting and signing an AI agreement. So they finally ended up signing or extending their existing Microsoft contract and taking on Copilot, right? So a lot of time and money was spent on bringing that in. So that finally, after 1.5 years, they were able to say, look, we are now 100% AI enabled. Everybody in the company is able to use AI. Okay, great. So after all that time and money, there was almost no efficiency gains because now everybody had Copilot in their Office applications, but that didn't mean they would would benefit, you know, would really benefit from it. So those centralized decisions don't really make sense from my point of view. And I've seen other companies that are moving away from this big top down decision making. A big manufacturer I spoke to, they've spent more time and energy on, first fixing their organizational problems and then making local decisions on very specific problems they were facing. And of course, their AI can be, you know, of huge benefit. So if you isolate an issue or something that is not really working great, you can isolate that. And instead of just saying, I want to replace an existing process with AI, you could first start saying, look, what was the process designed for? Is it still relevant like that? Can it be changed? You just don't take the existing one and try to automate that, but you question the whole process and say, look, if we would be AI native, what would that look like? And only then implement AI to solve a very, very specific problem. That's a whole different approach than just saying we're rolling out AI company wide.
Right. Now, speaking about rolling AI, you mentioned Copilot, interesting point also as well. And we know like there's a huge push from all companies involved in AI to adopt this. Now, what I'm hearing, and also like we discussed this with some of my guests here on this podcast, um, it's a positive thing if a company actually is willing to invest, right? Because we know the companies that back in the days they didn't invest in digital infrastructure, cloud, and all these revolution that happened in the enterprise. So slowly they lost their position in the market, but now we see companies they want to rush into this because there is a real FOMO, like, hey, if you miss this AI, this is your last exit. Like after this, you might be out of business. But what's happening is also we're hearing that employees are feeling overwhelmed, with all these new technologies coming to them. And of course there is like double effect, I would call it. So first, of course, a lot of information coming to the individual. Second is the fear of losing jobs, and we say, okay, you're trying to replace me with an AI thing. So now, from leadership perspective, Jürgen, how much is important and what can be done, to make sure that we discussed the culture, we discussed also, the vision, how we can reinforce these basics, as you call them, to make sure that when we adopt this, we don't overwhelm our employees, and actually we don't let them have this fear from being replaced by AI.
I think it's a very good question. I think if we take the sheer talent of people that are typically in a company, right? If you're bringing them together as a team and you add technical expertise to any team, right? Don't separate IT from any business function, but have somebody who's knowledgeable about AI and technology, implement it in the teams, and then bring teams together and say, look, what amazing things could we do with AI? And then brainstorm on how AI can support them to do a better job, to do a better job for their customers, to make their customers more happy, to get more customers, to get more recommendations. So I think if the people who are closest to any topic are able to build up AI solutions, then great things can be built.
Right. Now, how much important is the learning also as well, like being, I mean, what I mean by learning is, maybe sometimes we've seen this in enterprise and even like in small organizations when there's a new technology, right? So there's a fear, oh, what if this project fails, what if this pilot fails? How much also is important, especially now with the AI, is to be trained on speed. You mentioned the decision, at the beginning of the discussion, but also speed of learning, and learning in a sense like, you try something. What I like to call it, which is back to basics, to something I love, which is design thinking. I
Mhm.
talk a lot about it. I'm passionate about it because design thinking is like you put the customer in mind, and just as the example you gave from Amazon, and then you try to iterate. Yeah, you might not be perfect from the first time. So how we can, from leadership perspective, I would call it bring the startup mentality, which is like daring to try things and failing and then try again, to an established organization. How we can bring that.
So you have to embrace those, this experimentation mentality. And I've worked with a company that regularly held design thinking workshops, which I found great. Just the people wouldn't learn what design thinking really is, but they would get an understanding of going first broad and then consolidating their ideas and get into the habit of experimentation. And failure in that mindset is a success, right? If you're running 10 experiments and 9 of them fail and one is good, you learned a lot and you achieved a lot. So it's a change in mindset. And to your question on learning culture, I think you can only really learn by doing. So you can have a lot of online trainings on how to use, for example, Claude Code. But I
Hmm.
can personally say, so I really wanted to understand, how good is the technology? Could I, as a non-programmer, develop a software application? I wanted to know that. So I tried it. So I downloaded Visual Studio Code, uh, got Claude Code into it, started with a basic idea and worked my way from, mapping out the idea to architectural design, user interface, and everything, and then started programming it with Claude Code. And at the end of the day is a good. I mean, it took me 2 weeks, but I had a complex application running using different AI tools with API calls and had a running application that was really sophisticated. So by experimenting and trying out, I learned so much. And I think, you know, it is important to try things and not just to learn by watching a video and reading a book on stuff. It's really trying out and experimenting. And I think, I mean, a lot of companies would say, but we don't have time.
Hmm.
What what I'm seeing a lot is everybody is maxed out and super busy. But if you look into a diary of a lot of people in tech, right? Most of it is alignment calls and reporting calls. And I can
Right.
I can say that for myself in my last corporate job, I was spending probably on average between 25 and 30 hours a week on reporting and alignment calls, right? And what that means is you're always busy, busy to the max, you're in back-to-back meetings, and you don't even feel productive because in reality you're not producing anything, right? You're just reporting numbers upwards, whatever KPIs are tracked, and you align the people that are completely misaligned. And since everybody's reporting and aligning, so after a week, everybody's aligned, but nothing got done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a very important point, and I think it goes back even before the AI, because there was always this confusion, Jürgen, between busyness and productivity. So this is something, and I think the AI amplify this problem more, because when you keep yourself busy but nothing happens, you know I don't know. And what you just the experiment you just mentioned, it also like remind me. I know I keep repeating this book because one of my favorite books, which is the Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. So
Mhm.
this book, I love it. I love it because it discussed like actually why companies, and one of the main reasons is because they go into these nitty gritty of things that doesn't move the needle, and like all of a sudden a young new company, they start to innovate and these things. So one of the points in that book is, of course, it's not like it might not apply to every company, but they say if you also want, if you don't put all the resources of the company, you just like have a team, kind of a task force, where you assign them to go and to try these things. Even sometimes we've seen companies, they do a spin out of the main company, of the mothership, and they establish a new company to just do this. And once they are ready, they bring them in. So is that something also you think it's useful with the current trends we're seeing in the AI age?
It's definitely useful. It definitely helps. Ultimately, I would like every team to be an experimenting team, to rather than just have one team that is dedicated to that. I would dedicate a certain amount of time of the
Hmm.
people to sit together and to experiment. Because ultimately, if you think about that, you would have a sales organization that is talking to their customers all the time. So they would know best what what the current situation of their customers is. So if you have a separate team, it's great. They can come up with new business concepts, new ideas. But if you take the principle of design thinking to have really different backgrounds at the table, right? You shouldn't leave the people talking to your customers outside. So ideally, I would more turn to an integrated model where you have, experimentation, design thinking space within the teams, within all of your teams, rather than, it's a good first, a good starter to have a separate team dedicated. But ultimately, I want that to be present. This mindset and the experimentation, I want to be present in in all departments. And I recently, I was working with a client, and we we really had a funny story about what AI or how AI is used in companies. Right? It was a mid-sized company, and one of their managers was really complaining about getting huge reports. I mean, massive PDF documents from two of his direct reports. And he said he started to use AI to summarize those reports. So, because he didn't have time to go through all those documents, right? And then I spoke to those direct reports, and they were producing those documents with AI. So basically,
Yeah.
what happened is two people produced massive documents, and every day sending them to their manager, and their manager took an AI to summarize what the AI on the other side had created. So it it kind of shows what nonsense can come up if you don't have any better idea how to use AI.
Yeah, I think this will be one of the major challenges for organizations, because accept it or not, like your people will use AI. We are creatures of shortcuts. I came to this conclusion since time, a while of time, because I myself like to do shortcuts, right? Like, let's be honest.
Yes.
Like, we try, and there's nothing wrong. Like, don't get me wrong. Actually, it's good because to your point about when you mentioned you tried with you know, installing Visual Studio and having Cloud Code and all this. These days, I'm playing with agents and agent frameworks, and like it's out of mind now. An agent in the morning, it sends me a message on Telegram and seeing my calendar and just telling me, hey, like, this is where you should focus today, this is what you should do, like it's like good to embrace what is useful, but we need to
Yes.
make the separation, like what's hype and what's not. And this is part of the things, what we try to do on the show here is to show the real use cases of the AI, and versus what is hype, which is something you're gonna have it. Your people will hate it with time because they were actually doing it without the AI, and now you just amplified this thing. Like, you mentioned the example of drafting report, and I can give a lot of other things. Filling the CRM with invented stories, right? And filling, fields with things we know, you and me, we know. Like, your people, they don't like to do it, but they have to. I understand why. But it's like it gonna like just amplify it 10 times, even now with the agents, maybe 100 times. Um, but
Yeah,
let's see where.
100%.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and you're right. I mean, we coming from the field, you pretty much understand. You have your Salesforce, your people running in the field. They have to update their CRM system. In some companies even twice a day, right? And if not, they're getting pressure. And yeah, if they use automation to fill that up, because sometimes they're putting stuff in that is not real. We all know that, right? And you know, sometimes if you're looking at how much companies are spending on forecast calls and CRM inspection, how much that costs, right? In terms of money, hours spent, and lost opportunities, you know, where people are not spending their time with the customers, but with a tool, right? And if you compare that with just taking an average of the system,
Hmm.
you understand quite well that I mean, if you go to a finance person, they can tell you exactly what the range is where a quarter will end. It's
Right.
it's an easy calculation. So all those forecast calls, what are they good for in the end? They are kind of a reflex for control, which gives kind of the illusion of having more control. But I don't believe that. So, first, I don't believe that more forecast calls will do more deals in the long run. Yeah, you can put a lot of pressure on people to bring in deals for a quarter, but what's that good for if your vision is
Hmm.
different, right? If you have a vision. So if you want to delight your customers, if that is your goal, you know, that doesn't make sense. And in the long run, you will not have more business by putting more pressure on people to pull in a deal into a quarter. And you will
Hmm.
also not do better business by doing more forecast calls. And same goes for if you track marketing just by leads, right? What, you're forcing the people to cheat the system in essence. So
Right.
they would be producing leads in existing customers, for example, by connecting every new opportunity in an existing account to a campaign. And they
Right.
would be spending more time on tweaking the system than, really working on something that is bringing value to the company.
Right. I'm curious to see how this will change with AI. I know it's gonna be slow, and it's my expectation. And the reason, because you mentioned something now, Jürgen, is about this hunger for control. Because there are people who are obsessed, by the way, in just opening dashboards and just nagging on people. But if I think about it, you know, actually an AI can do this, right? So after a while, because checking the data, if people are putting the right data, so that will be there will be no need. I wonder, like, you know, how you think, we can change this faster, because um I believe, and we repeated this theme a lot of time during this episode today, which is like fast decision, fast learning, changing the way how we can fasten also this change when it comes to the leadership way of thinking. Should we go and talk, because you're doing this work currently, Jürgen? Should we go and talk to the investors? Should we go and talk to the stakeholders? Should we go and talk, to the, let's say the board, and tell them, like, guys, the old playbook was good, as you mentioned, in a certain time, but in these times you're just wasting your time and money, and actually you're letting your people hate their jobs, and they're gonna leave you. So where we can start this change?
I think it needs the leadership team of the company. And yeah, they have to be brave enough to sell this to their owners and investors. And we're seeing a number of companies that are making those shifts. I know of a big pharma company and a big manufacturing company, global companies, really, really big. I can't mention their names, right? But they have CEOs that are really pushing for that change. And I spoke to somebody from finance, extended leadership team of a huge manufacturing company, right? One of the strongest brands in automotive, I would say. And I asked him at a conference for transformation, I asked him, how do you see the competition from China?
Hmm.
And he said, yeah, that's a very good question. He said, people think, our biggest pressure is production cost, right? And he said, but that's absolute nonsense. Yeah, energy prices are higher than in some other countries, but our production facilities are optimized to the max. That is not our issue. Our real issue is we used to be the innovators in our space, but now, in the time that it takes us to develop one new generation of our flagship product, in the same time, China is developing 3 or 4 generations, right? And I said, why do you think that is? He said, that's two things. First is they are much quicker in decision making,
Mm.
right? Every single decision in our company takes far too long because nobody can really decide anything locally. It needs to go through approval chains and it's just taking too long. And sometimes it's too risky to suggest a change, right, from a career perspective. And the other element was, meanwhile, in China, they have a sheer unlimited amount of strong engineers, right? But he said, the reason we are transforming is not that, oh, we believe in this vision. The reason is we will cease to exist if we are not becoming quicker. And the only way to become quicker is if we are transforming to be a company with distributed decision making, where teams are able to make decisions, and where the company works more like an organism rather than a machine. And it's a shift in thinking, but those big organizations, I know of this pharma organization and this automotive organization, it's it's a tough one, right?
It is.
Transforming such a huge organization, and it won't be done in 2 3 years, but it's necessary because otherwise you will be out of business against companies that are quicker. And with AI, this transformation isn't optional anymore. It's
No.
either you do it or you will be taken out. 100%. I'm 100% convinced.
100% convinced with you also, Jürgen. And it's not, I tell people, it's not the, these, what people think, yeah, it's similar to the, when the internet started to appear, and yeah, but still businesses existed. Or for example, when the cloud started, or the mobile revolution, I'm telling them this is completely different. And of course we're not there yet, and this is why I mentioned about the agents a little bit and my own experience with it. Like, if I can do it on a small scale, imagine today one company, if they have done it the right way. And actually, it's funny enough about the decision and the automation, right? And the authority. So, if, of course, agents can do mistake, don't give them full access. I'm not saying this, but if you put them into a sandbox, probably you will be surprised, you know, how much good, not perfect, how much good they can do a lot of things. And if your competitor is using them today, you are like really, 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 you should be having, red flags and, alarms in your place, in your company, if you're not following with the AI, because absolutely it's like the major disruption. And it's not a hype. Again, I tell people, actually I try to bust the hype on the show, but when it's something real, I tell you, no, it's real. We're seeing it. Just if you allow me, Jürgen, an example also from people who are similar to our,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, to our domain. Like what we used to, I remember, maybe 10 years back, if I want to prepare a quote, or maybe I want to prepare a proposal, so this was a long time to do. So now, I can go to Cloud Co-work, or I can go to any of these other tools, and if I have the templates there, it's done. I building ROIs tools, for some of my, people I work with, and they tell me like this used to take with 3 4 days sometime to prepare this, to get the information, and they get a very nice clean PDF customized with the logo of the company. you know it's really fascinating how fast you can move with this. Now, there's something I didn't ask you about, Jürgen. Tell me a little bit more about the book, and why you called it the leadership operating system. Like, what can we expect? And of course, you don't have to tell me the teaser of all the book, but I mean, just for the audience to have some sense of what they can expect.
Yeah, sure. So, and thanks for asking. So, with this book, I took kind of all my experience and the different areas where I think, you know, it's a make or break for a company. And it
Hmm.
starts with, how a strong vision is influencing everything that a company is doing. Um, then the organizational design decision, how you build the company or how you transform it. Then I also put a strong emphasis on really understanding your customers. Every company would tell you they know their ICP, their ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
And typically they're spending millions on data analysis on their customers. But usually nobody has time to actually talk to their customers. And I also see this as a huge gap. You're developing all those marketing campaigns without ever talking to your customers. You build your ideal customer profile on data, but data is great, but you are building an hypothesis. you have to go to your customers and to understand and check whether your hypothesis is right. Are they even using the product the way you think they're using them, right? Then I look at the people element. Excuse me. So, you know, the main, the lifeblood of a company is the people. Even if you think about, getting the maximum of out of AI, it
Right.
is bright, engaged people that are driving your business. So, but selecting the right people and putting them in the right roles is super important. Companies look most of the times, even if you look at a job description, they talk about hard skills and then, yeah, it has to be a cultural match. But not much effort is spent on, what personality profile do I need? Do I need somebody who's analytical, or do I need somebody who's more strategic or more broad? Do I need an executor or a thinker? Extrovert, introvert, all great people, but they will only flourish if you put them in the right roles that match their personal traits. So if you're just looking at job history and, oh, has always worked in sales and has been working for great companies, oh, and did his numbers, okay, check, great person. I've talked, I had to, you know, take somebody out of a sales team that was a brilliant mind, but didn't feel comfortable in front of people. I mean, seriously, it, th- this guy was really suffering because he didn't feel comfortable talking to people face to face, was more analytical, was was not a personable person, but had to go to customers every single day, right? He was
Hmm.
completely in the wrong job, never really successful. And when I joined that company and had my first one-on-one with that person, he was really scared and said, "Well, I think things are not working great." And he said, I know, and am I getting fired?" I said, "No, but first I want to know, how did you end up in this job? I I don't think it's a good fit for you." So really getting people in a place where they can flourish.
Right.
Everybody's got talents, right? But just put them in the right place. So I'm looking at all the different elements that I experienced over 30 years and try to give some good advice where to start, where to look to build better companies. And again, the reason I'm doing that is I am passionate about building better companies that are better for people to work for, where they can have success, have fun, and better output is, more success is just a natural result out of that.
That's a great, again, you mentioned this in the intro, and it's nice, like you mentioned it towards the end of the episode today, Jürgen. I think this is a very noble, I would call it, goal that you have to build like a greater companies, because I think, although like we see in the literature that majority of the companies they fail after their first couple of years and only the few they stay, but there's another statistics, that shows, and I learned this from my American friends who were on the show with me, like, they have something that they measure the number of companies that they were on the S&P 500, and then how many of them they still there. And there's also like companies that actually they go out of business because of these mistakes also. And it's a very thriving mission that you have to help the new ones and help also the existing ones, because at the end of the day, this is how if we love what we do, we can help a lot of other people. This is why I do. Again, you asked me before we started recording about the show. This is one of the main reason also why I like this podcast, because we can inspire others to do great things. Listening to someone who's expert like yourself, Jürgen, in building better companies and keeping them resilient to changes. So I really appreciate the time with me today. Just one more thing, which based on what you mentioned at the end, to me, I think the product people, which we call them the product management people in any organization, so who are they can talk marketing, they can talk sales, they can talk to customer success. So I think these kinds of roles, they're gonna thrive because these are the people who actually, they do it fantastically. I've been lucky enough, when I work in any organization, they were my favorite people to talk to, the product people, because they have to be like, multitasking and multi-language in a sense. They talk marketing, sales, engineering, and with everyone. So these kinds of role, I think, especially with AI, they're gonna become very important. Even like I went and I bought some books about product management and from how to be the best product manager, because I think this is one of the skills that we can learn also. To your point, Jurgen, because you mentioned at the beginning about the teams that they always fight, like sales and marketing, customer success with engineering, and so on. So learn the empathy, and I think when we establish this empathy, um, people can thrive in the organization. So thank you for bringing this up. At the end, where people can get in touch, and if someone want to, have maybe some consultancy, Jurgen, where they can find you?
So there's two ways basically. One is on LinkedIn. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, Jürgen Dauk, you'll find me. Would be great to contact me, even just to stay in the conversation. I would love to hear the feedback, on how your organization is doing. I'm a lifelong learner, right? So getting your feedback is really important to me. And you can go to my book website, which is the leadership-os.com. There you'll also have a section where you can download self-checking templates, right? To just score yourself on how mature is my organization on the path to implementing AI. You can get that for free. It doesn't cost anything. Just register on the website. So it's the leadership-os.com.
Great. I will make, people's lives easy. And this is what I do with all my guests. So I'm gonna put the links in the show notes. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, you will find the links that Jürgen just mentioned, his LinkedIn profile, the book link in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find them in the description. And again, Jürgen, I can't thank you enough for this, very rich, productive, I hope, for many discussion. And I hope, organization, they will benefit out of it to keep building great companies. And if someone is struggling, probably come to you and try to see if you can help them. So thank you again for being here with me today. And usually how I end my episodes, everyone knows. So if you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, give me a small favor. We're trying to make an impact, so share it with as much people as you can think they can benefit out of it. And if you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, thank you very much for the support. Your messages, your notes, your feedback. I know some of you message me privately saying, hey, like, we like that, what your guest said, we cannot like it, we cannot share it. I understand this. Full respect. I understand. And this is why we are your voices also as well. So appreciate, your support. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.